A puppy begs a cop for help, and when she reads its collar, she instantly locks down the entire street. What looks like a random stray in the rain turns into a chilling message that could mean life or death. The officer is forced to choose, ignore the warning and risk disaster, or trust a desperate animal that refuses to give up. But when she follows where it leads, she uncovers a danger far bigger than anyone expects, and one wrong move could blow everything apart. Why would a collar carry such a terrifying secret? And what is hiding behind the doors of that house that makes the officer risk her badge and her life? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below, and while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The steady drum of rain against the cruiser's roof matched the dull ache in Danica Hale's right knee. Another quiet night on light patrol, the kind of assignment they gave to officers they didn't quite trust anymore. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel as she remembered the days when she and her canine partner Zeus had worked the most challenging cases. Now, a year after the injury that had ended her canine handling career, she was reduced to driving the sleepy streets of residential neighborhoods. The windshield wipers swept back and forth, clearing sheets of water from her view. The clock on the dashboard read 11:15 at night. Through the blur of rain, something small darted into the street ahead of her. Hale's foot instantly moved to the brake pedal, her police training kicking in automatically. A dog. Just a tiny thing, probably lost in the storm. But instead of running away from the cruiser's headlights, the small beagle mix planted itself directly in Hale's path. Its fur was soaked through, making it look even smaller and more pitiful. Yet there was something deliberate in the way it stood there, trembling but determined. "Come on, little guy," Hale muttered, flashing her lights. "Get out of the way." The dog didn't budge. If anything, it seemed to square its shoulders, as if saying, "No, you need to stop." Hale sighed. Her knee protested as she pushed open the driver's door and stepped out into the rain. "All right then, let's get you somewhere dry." Years of canine handling had left her with a soft spot for dogs, even if thinking about it brought a familiar pang of loss. As she approached, the beagle mix didn't run. Instead, it took a few steps toward her, head lowered but tail giving a tentative wag. In the beam of the headlights, Hale could see it wore a collar. Good, someone was probably missing their pet. She crouched down, ignoring the twinge in her knee, and reached for the ID tag. The metal disc felt oddly warm in her rain-chilled fingers. But as she turned it to catch the light, her breath caught in her throat. This wasn't a regular pet ID. Etched into the metal were the words, "If I'm out alone, my person is in danger. 114 Wyeth, do not use the front door." Below that, scratched in what looked like newer lettering, "Gas line compromised." Hale read the message twice, her police instinct surging to life. This wasn't some lost pet. This was a cry for help. She looked at the little dog with new respect. Someone had trained this animal to seek help if things went wrong, and now here it was, doing exactly that. The beagle mix met her gaze with intelligent eyes that seemed to say, "Finally, someone's paying attention." Rain trickled down the back of Hale's neck as she straightened up. Her knee complained, but she barely noticed now. The old familiar surge of adrenaline was coursing through her, the feeling she'd missed since being relegated to light patrol. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hale." She spoke into her radio, eyes still on the dog. "I've got a possible situation at 114 Wyeth Street. Request backup for a welfare check, but have them approach without lights or sirens. Possible gas leak involved the dog's tail wagged harder at the street name, confirming Hale's decision to take this seriously." "Copy that, Officer Hale. Be advised backup is 15 minutes out due to weather conditions, 15 minutes. If someone was really in danger, that could be too long." Hale looked down at the determined little dog, then back at her cruiser. The responsible thing would be to wait for backup. That's what they'd tell her in the morning briefing. But she hadn't become a K9 handler by always taking the safe route, and something about this dog's urgency told her time might be critical. "Okay, little partner," she said softly, reaching down to give the dog a gentle pat. Show me what's wrong." The beagle mix immediately turned and started trotting through the rain, looking back every few steps to make sure Hale was following. Despite its small size, it moved with purpose, clearly knowing exactly where it needed to go. Hale returned to her cruiser just long enough to grab her flashlight and call in her position. Then she followed the dog, her boots splashing through puddles, the rain seeming to grow heavier with each step. Her right knee protested the quick pace, but she pushed through it. Someone had trained this dog as a backup plan, a last resort. Whatever was happening at 114 Wyeth, it was serious enough that someone had prepared for the worst. The little dog led her down 3 blocks, moving faster now that it knew Hale was committed to following. They turned onto Wyeth Street, a quiet residential road lined with modest homes. Most windows were dark at this hour, but Hale could make out the house numbers through the rain. 110, 112. There it was, 114 Wyeth, a small ranch-style house set back from the street, its windows dark like its neighbors. But something felt off about the silence. The dog's warning about the gas line rang in Hale's mind. If someone had tampered with it, the beagle mix had stopped at the corner of the property, watching Hale intently. The message had been clear. Don't use the front door. Hale clicked off her flashlight, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness. Years of K9 work had taught her to trust a dog's instincts. This little one had already proven itself smarter than the average pet. She touched her radio. "Dispatch, Officer Hale. I'm at the location. No obvious signs of disturbance, but something's not right. Tell backup to approach quietly from the east side of Wyeth." The dog was already moving again, circling toward the back of the house. Hale followed, every sense on high alert. The rain helped mask their approach, but it also made it harder to hear if anyone was moving inside the house. Her injured knee reminded her with every step that she wasn't the officer she used to be. But right now, she was all this little dog had, and whoever had sent it out into the night needed help. Sometimes being a good cop meant trusting your instincts, even when they led you into the rain with nothing but a desperate dog as your partner. The beagle mix stopped at the back corner of the house, its wet fur standing on end. Hale could smell it now, the faint but distinctive odor of natural gas. Someone had definitely tampered with the line, just as the collar had warned. One spark could turn this whole situation deadly. She reached down to give the dog a reassuring pat. "Good job, little partner. Now we just need to figure out what's waiting for us inside." The dog pressed against her leg, trembling but steadfast. In its eyes, Hale saw the same loyal determination she used to see in Zeus's gaze. Different dog, different situation, but that unwavering trust was exactly the same. Someone was counting on them both now, and despite her limitations, Hale knew she had to find a way to help. Danica Hale's hand moved to her radio with determined purpose, her fingers wrapping around it as the rain continued to fall steadily around her. The smell of gas grew stronger, confirming her worst fears. She couldn't wait any longer. This entire street could become a danger zone in seconds. "Dispatch, this is Officer Hale. I need an immediate lockdown of Wyeth Street, all vehicles from Cedar to Marshall. Gas leak confirmed at 114 Wyeth. Repeat, requesting full street lockdown." There was a moment of crackling silence before dispatch responded, the voice sharp with concern. "Officer Hale, Sergeant Mackenzie requests confirmation of imminent threat before authorizing street lockdown. Standard protocol requires utility verification." "Negative, dispatch." Hale cut in, her voice firm. "We don't have time for utilities. I can smell gas from the exterior of the building. This is a public safety emergency. Stand by, Officer Hale." The little dog whimpered at her feet, tugging at her pant leg. Looking down at the collar again, she could now make out the name Thimble engraved above the warning message. Thimble's eyes were wide with urgency, constantly darting back toward the house. "Officer Hale, Sergeant Mackenzie needs more than a smell to authorize full street lockdown. Please wait for backup and utility response. Listen carefully, dispatch." Hale interrupted, her voice taking on an edge of steel. "I've got probable cause of tampering with gas lines, possible hostage situation, and imminent danger to civilians. I'm initiating emergency protocols now. Log my badge number and timestamp. I take full responsibility." She didn't wait for a response. Clicking her radio to the general channel, she broadcast, "All units in vicinity of Wyeth Street. This is Officer Hale. Emergency lockdown in effect. Need immediate assistance clearing civilians from their homes and establishing perimeter from Cedar to Marshall." The rain seemed to grow heavier as Hale moved into action. She jogged to her cruiser, ignoring the protest from her knee, and grabbed her emergency kit. The bright yellow vest made her more visible in the darkness as she began moving house to house. At the first home, she pounded on the door with authority. An elderly woman answered, blinking in confusion at the late-hour disturbance. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Hale with the police department. We have a gas leak emergency. I need you to shut off any running vehicles or appliances immediately and evacuate to Cedar Street. Please grab only essential items and any medications you need." Similar scenes played out at each house. Some residents were already asleep and took longer to respond. Others had questions she didn't have time to answer fully, but years of experience had taught Hale how to project calm authority even while conveying urgency. Through it all, Thimble stayed close to her heels, occasionally tugging her back toward 114 Wyeth whenever Hale moved too far away. The dog's persistence only strengthened her resolve that something was seriously wrong inside that house. Her radio crackled constantly with increasingly agitated messages from command. "Officer Hale, you are exceeding your authority. Hale, stand down and wait for supervisor arrival. This is Sergeant Mackenzie. Officer Hale, respond immediately." She acknowledged none of them, focusing instead on getting people to safety. A teenager trying to start his car got a firm order to leave it parked. A family having a late dinner was instructed to turn off their stove immediately. House by house, she cleared the street. 2 patrol cars arrived within 10 minutes, their officers initially confused by the situation, but quickly falling in line when Hale explained what she'd found. They began setting up barricades at both ends of the street while continuing the evacuation efforts. "Listen," Hale told them. "I know this seems extreme based on a dog's collar, but something is very wrong here. That gas smell is getting stronger, and whoever's inside that house went to the trouble of training this dog as an emergency signal. They knew they might." "Need help?" Officer Chen, a rookie who had only been on the force for 6 months, nodded immediately. "I trust your instincts, Hale. You were legendary in K9 before." She trailed off, but Hale appreciated that at least someone remembered her track record. Officer Rodriguez was more skeptical but professional enough to follow Hale's lead in the field. The rain had soaked through Hale's uniform completely now, but she barely noticed. Thimble was getting more agitated, circling around her with increasing urgency. The dog's wet fur was plastered to its small body, making it look even more vulnerable, but its determination never wavered. Sergeant Mackenzie's arrival was announced by squealing tires and a blast of angry horn. The supervisor's car came to an abrupt stop just outside the barricade, and Mackenzie emerged, face red with anger even in the dim street lighting. "Hale!" he bellowed, striding toward them. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "You've disrupted an entire neighborhood based on what? A dog with a suspicious collar?" Hale stood her ground, Thimble pressing against her leg. "Sir, with respect, we have confirmation of gas leak, possible tampering. The collar warning—" "The collar warning?" Mackenzie's voice dripped with sarcasm. "You've exceeded your authority, disrupted dozens of lives, and tied up department resources because of a message on a dog collar? This isn't K9 unit anymore, Hale. You're on light duty for a reason." The words stung, but Hale kept her voice level. "Sir, someone went to the trouble of having that message engraved. They trained this dog to seek help. That's not normal pet behavior. Combined with the gas smell, which could be anything, a faulty water heater, a poorly maintained stove. Then why the warning about the front door?" Hale challenged. "Why train the dog to carry that specific message?" Mackenzie opened his mouth to respond, but at that moment, Thimble let out a sharp bark, the first sound Hale had heard from the dog all night. The beagle mix was staring intently at 114 Wyeth, every muscle tense. Hale had seen that posture before, in her K9 days. It was the stance of a dog that had detected something significant. Despite her injury, despite the career setbacks, despite everything, Her instincts as a handler had never left her. "Sir," she said quietly, "I know how this looks. I know I'm not the officer I used to be, but I'm telling you, something is wrong in that house. Really wrong. And if I'm mistaken, I'll accept whatever consequences come. But if I'm right and we do nothing—" She let the sentence hang there, the implications clear. Mackenzie's face worked through several emotions before settling into grim resignation. "Fine," the sergeant growled. "But this is on your head, Hale. Every bit of it. If this turns out to be nothing—" "Understood, sir." Hale turned back to Chen and Rodriguez. "Maintain the perimeter. Nobody in or out without direct authorization. And make sure Utilities knows this is priority 1 when they arrive." Thimble tugged at her pant leg again, more insistent than ever. The dog's message had brought help, just as it had been trained to do. Now it was trying to complete its mission, getting someone to that house. Looking down at those determined eyes, Hale made a silent promise. Whatever was waiting inside 114 Wyeth, whatever trouble her actions might bring to her career, she wouldn't let this loyal little dog down. Someone had trusted Thimble to be their lifeline. Now it was up to Hale to prove that trust wasn't misplaced. Danica Hale stood firm in the deepening darkness, her hand steady on her radio as doubts and criticisms crackled through from her fellow officers. The rain had picked up, drumming against the top of her patrol car and streaming down her jacket. At her feet, the little beagle mix, Thimble, whined softly, pressing against her leg. "Officer Hale, you need to provide concrete evidence for this lockdown." Lieutenant Sanders' voice cut through the static, sharp with irritation. "We've got citizens calling in, complaining about being ordered inside. This isn't some training exercise." Hale took a deep breath, fighting to keep her voice level. "Sir, with respect, we've got a clear warning about a gas leak and a potential trap. I'm not willing to risk civilian lives because we didn't take proper precautions." "A message on a dog collar isn't proper evidence, Hale." The lieutenant's voice rose. "You've got 15 minutes to show me something real, or I'm ending this circus." Hale's jaw tightened. She knew how this looked. A washed-up K9 handler going overboard over a stray dog. But something in her gut told her this was real. The puppy's desperate behavior, the carefully scratched message, it all added up to trouble. A softer voice came through her radio. "Officer Hale, this is Dispatcher Cabrera. I'm keeping your channel clear and monitoring the grid for any related calls." There was a pause before she added, "I remember when your instinct saved that family in the Martinez case. Just do what you need to do." "Thanks, Inez," Hale said quietly, grateful for the support. She'd worked with Cabrera for years, and she'd seen firsthand how Hale's hunches often paid off. A young EMT jogged up to her, his medical bag bouncing against his side. His name tag read Monroe, C, and his eyes were bright with determination, despite the nervous energy radiating from him. "Officer Hale, I'm Cal Monroe. They stationed me here as first response if anything happens." He glanced at the dark house at number 114 Wyeth Street. "Everyone's saying this is overkill, but—" He knelt to pet Thimble, who immediately licked his hand. "I've learned to trust when animals act strange. They know things we don't." Hale nodded, feeling a spark of relief at finding another ally. "Thanks for backing me up, Monroe. Right now, I need to check that house, but we can't use the front door." She reached into her patrol car and pulled out her tactical kit, removing a small telescoping mirror on an extending pole, equipment left over from her K9 days. Her knee twinged as she moved toward the house, reminding her of why she'd been relegated to regular patrol. But those years of training weren't wasted. "Stay back," she told Monroe, motioning him to keep his distance. Thimble stayed obediently by the EMT's side as Hale approached the porch, moving with careful, measured steps. The rain made it harder to see, but Hale knew what she was doing. She extended the mirror slowly, angling it to check under the porch first, standard procedure from her K9 sweeps. Nothing there. Then she moved to the front steps, checking each one methodically. When she finally raised the mirror to examine the door itself, her breath caught. There, barely visible in the dim light, was a thin wire running from the door latch to something concealed behind the frame. "Monroe," she called softly. "Radio dispatch. Tell them I've found a tripwire at the front door." This just went from a possible gas leak to a deliberate trap. Cal's hands shook slightly as he keyed his radio, but his voice was steady. "Dispatch, this is EMT Monroe on scene at 114 Wyeth. Officer Hale has confirmed a tripwire device at the front entrance. Repeat, confirmed tripwire device." The radio exploded with activity. Lieutenant Sanders' voice came through immediately, all traces of skepticism gone. "All units, we now have a confirmed threat at 114 Wyeth. Bomb squad is being dispatched. Officer Hale, maintain perimeter and await tactical team." Hale kept her mirror steady, examining every inch of the entrance while they waited. Her mind raced through the implications. Someone had deliberately rigged this house, possibly connecting the tripwire to the gas line mentioned in Thimble's message. One wrong move could trigger an explosion that would take out half the block. Her decision to clear the street didn't seem like overkill now. Dispatcher Cabrera's voice came through again. "Officer Hale, be advised bomb squad is 8 minutes out. Fire department is staging 2 blocks north. Do you need additional units for crowd control?" "Negative," Hale replied, watching as neighbors peeked through their windows at the growing number of emergency vehicles. "Everyone's staying put for now." She turned to Cal Monroe, who was keeping Thimble calm while maintaining his position. "Good call on believing the dog. Sometimes the crazy hunches pan out." He offered a small smile. "My training officer says instincts are just experience we haven't put into words yet. Looks like your K9 experience wasn't wasted after all." Hale felt a warmth in her chest despite the cold rain. It had been a long time since anyone had acknowledged her past experience as valuable rather than treating her like damaged goods. But there was no time to dwell on that. Somewhere inside that house, someone needed help, and the tripwire was just the beginning. Thunder rolled overhead as more emergency vehicles arrived, their lights painting the rain-slicked street in alternating red and blue. Hale kept her position, mirror steady, watching for any movement or changes in the wire's tension. Thimble sat alert beside Monroe, both of them waiting for whatever would come next. The next 15 minutes were a blur of activity as tactical teams arrived and began their assessment. Hale briefed them on everything: the dog's warning, the message about the gas line, and her discovery of the tripwire. No one questioned her judgment now. The evidence was clear before them. Her instincts had been right, and her quick action had potentially saved lives. But even as the professionals took over, Hale couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something crucial. Thimble's worried whines told her the same thing. Whatever danger threatened the dog's person was still very real, and time was running out. Lieutenant Sanders approached, his earlier skepticism replaced with grudging respect. "Good catch, Hale. Bomb squad's doing their initial assessment now. Looks like we owe you an apology for doubting your call." "No apologies needed, sir," Hale replied, her eyes still on the house. "But someone's still in there, and they went to a lot of trouble to make sure no one could get in through the front. We need to find another way." The lieutenant nodded grimly. "Agreed. But we do this by the book now." No more solo calls. Hale watched as the tactical team set up their equipment, knowing that every minute counted. Beside her, Cal Monroe kept one hand on Thimble's head. Both of them focused on the house that had become the center of their world. Whatever came next, at least she wasn't facing it alone anymore. The rain continued to fall, washing away any doubts about her decision to trust a desperate puppy's warning. Now they just had to figure out how to save whoever was trapped inside before it was too late. The rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle as Danica Hale conferred with Dispatcher Inez Cabrera over the radio. Her knee ached from the damp weather, but she pushed the discomfort aside, focusing on the task at hand. They needed a coordinated approach that wouldn't trigger whatever deadly setup awaited inside 114 Wyeth Street. "Inez, we need utilities out here, stat." Hale spoke into her radio, keeping her voice steady despite the urgency building in her chest. "Priority is shutting down the gas supply at the street level. Can you expedite that? Already on it, Inez replied promptly. Gas company crew is 3 minutes out. They've been briefed on the situation's sensitivity. Cal Monroe stood nearby, his EMT kit ready, watching Thimble pace nervously near a ground-level window well. The small dog's behavior had changed. Instead of frantic barking, it now whined softly, nose pressed against the metal grate covering the basement vent. Officer Hale, Cal called quietly. I think Thimble's trying to tell us something else. He crouched down beside the window well, careful not to touch anything. This vent might give us a way to see inside without disturbing any triggers. Hale limped over, studying the vent grate. It was old but secure, with gaps just wide enough to potentially thread something through. Good thinking, Monroe. What kind of equipment do you carry in that rig of yours? Cal's face brightened. We got these new fiber optic cameras last month for assessing trapped victims. The probe is tiny, maybe as thick as a pencil. We could thread it through there, get eyes inside without touching anything. The utility truck arrived moments later, its yellow warning lights casting new shadows across the wet pavement. 2 workers in heavy reflective gear approached after being cleared by the perimeter team. They moved with practiced efficiency to the curb, locating the main gas shutoff valve beneath a metal cover. Hold off on turning it yet, Hale instructed them. We need to coordinate this precisely. If there's a pressure trigger inside, any sudden changes could set it off. She turned back to her radio. Inez, are you still monitoring? Right here, Hale. Got the tactical feed up, too. What's your play? We're going to try a camera insertion through a basement vent. Have tactical standing by to analyze whatever we find. The second we confirm it's safe, we shut off the gas supply. Cal had already retrieved his camera kit, unfolding a small monitor attached to a flexible probe. His hands were steady now as he worked, professional training taking over. The probe has built-in LED lights, he explained. Resolution's pretty good, too. We should be able to see clearly once it's inside. Hale positioned herself to watch both the monitor and the house itself, constantly, scanning for any signs of movement or change. The tactical team maintained their positions, weapons trained on various points of entry, while the bomb squad continued their methodical assessment of the front door trap. With careful movements, Cal guided the fiber optic probe through one of the vent openings. The monitor flickered to life, showing a dark basement interior. He adjusted the light level, and grainy images began to take shape on the small screen. Pan left slowly, Hale instructed, her eyes fixed on the monitor. There's something... She trailed off as the image shifted, revealing a horrifying tableau. A woman sat propped against the basement wall, her wrists and ankles bound with thick tape. A gag covered her mouth, but her eyes were wide open, alert and terrified. Beside her stood a large propane cylinder, its valve connected to what appeared to be additional tubing that disappeared into the shadows. Oh my God, Cal whispered, his professional demeanor cracking slightly. Behind the bound woman, written on the concrete wall in what looked like black spray paint, were 2 words that made Hale's blood run cold. Don't call. Inez. Hale keyed her radio, keeping her voice low and controlled. We have confirmation of a hostage situation. Adult female, bound and conscious in the basement. There's a propane cylinder beside her, possibly rigged, and a warning message on the wall. The radio crackled with multiple responses as the tactical team processed this information. Lieutenant Sanders's voice cut through the chatter. Can you ID the victim? Cal adjusted the camera angle, zooming in on the woman's face. Despite her obvious fear, she was trying to communicate something with her eyes, looking deliberately toward something off-camera. That's Riley Cass, Hale said, recognition dawning. She lives here alone. Works at the library downtown. She'd taken a noise complaint there once, remembered Riley being polite, but somehow tense, as if carrying an invisible weight. The pieces started falling into place in Hale's mind. This wasn't some random act or accident. The elaborate setup, the warning message, the dog with its coded collar. Someone had planned this meticulously. Someone who wanted to control not just Riley Cass, but how and when she might be found. "This is a staged scene," she said, partly to herself and partly to Cal and Inez. Whoever did this wanted to make sure any rescue attempt would be on their terms. The tripwire, the gas line, the propane, it's all part of a bigger trap. Cal kept the camera steady, documenting every detail they could see. "The propane cylinder's valve is modified," he noted. "There's something attached to it that shouldn't be there. Inez, we need that gas shut off now." Hale decided. "Whatever trigger mechanism they've got in there, we can't risk any more fuel feeding into it." She signaled to the utility workers, who immediately began turning the heavy shut-off valve. The next few minutes were tense as they watched both Riley and the propane tank for any reaction to the gas being cut. Riley's eyes widened slightly, but nothing else changed in the basement. The cylinder remained stable, its mysterious modifications untriggered. "Gas is off at the curb," one of the utility workers confirmed. "Line should be depressurizing now." Hale nodded, her mind already working on next steps. They'd found Riley Cass alive, but she was still in immediate danger. The propane cylinder posed its own threat, independent of the house's gas supply. And somewhere out there, someone was probably watching, waiting to see if their elaborate trap would be sprung. "Keep that camera feed running," she instructed Cal. "Document everything. Inez, make sure Tactical has access to this footage. We need to figure out how to get her out of there without setting off whatever failsafe system they've rigged." Riley Cass blinked rapidly at the camera, trying to communicate something through her gag. Her eyes kept darting to the side, insistent and desperate. There was more to this situation than they could see through their limited viewport, and time was working against them. "We see you, Riley," Hale said quietly, though she knew Riley couldn't hear her. "We're going to get you out." "Just hold on," Thimble had settled next to Cal, watching the monitor with an almost human intensity. The small dog's warning had led them here, but Hale suspected there were more messages encoded in that collar, more pieces to this deadly puzzle they needed to solve. Danica Hale stared at the video feed, showing Riley Cass bound and helpless, her mind racing through years of emergency response experience. Something about this setup felt hauntingly familiar. The carefully planned trap, the specific technical knowledge needed to compromise a gas line, the cruel efficiency of it all. These weren't random acts. They were calculated moves by someone who knew exactly how emergency services would respond. "Wait a minute," Hale muttered, her face growing pale as the pieces clicked together. She turned to Inez, who was coordinating communications from her mobile command post. "I need everything you can find on Kellen Dwyer." Former volunteer firefighter, probably has a record. Inez's fingers flew across her keyboard. Pulling it up now. "But who is he?" "Riley's ex," Hale explained, her voice tight with urgency. "I remember his case from 2 years ago. He was suspected of running insurance scams, deliberately setting fires to collect payouts. They could never prove it, but he lost his position with the department." Cal Monroe, the young EMT, looked up from monitoring Riley's condition through the fiber cam. "How can you be sure it's him?" "Because this whole setup screams firefighter knowledge," Hale said, gesturing at the house. "The gas line tampering, the way the tripwire was rigged. These aren't things an average person would know how to do. He's using his training against us." Captain Martinez approached, his expression skeptical. "That's a pretty big leap, Hale. We need more than hunches right now. It's not just a hunch," Hale insisted, her voice rising with frustration. "Look at the pattern. He knows exactly how we'd respond to a gas leak. He knew we'd shut off the main line, which is why he planted that propane cylinder inside. He's thought through every standard procedure we'd follow," Inez called out from her station. "Got something. Kellen Dwyer, 38 years old. Multiple domestic violence complaints filed by Riley Cass, but all were dropped. Lost his firefighting position after 3 suspicious house fires in his response area. No convictions, but he was forced to resign." "There's more," Hale continued, pacing now as her mind raced ahead. "The don't call message. It's not just a threat. He's mocking us. He knows we can't use radios or phones near a potential gas leak. He's using our own safety protocols to isolate us." Cal shuddered. "That's twisted." Captain Martinez still looked unconvinced. "Even if you're right about Dwyer, we can't just assume. We don't have time for assumptions." Hale cut him off, pointing at the video feed. "Riley's in there with an unstable propane cylinder, and somewhere nearby, Dwyer is watching, waiting for us to make a mistake. He knows exactly how long it takes for command to get frustrated with a situation like this and pull back resources." As if on cue, Hale's radio crackled. "Command to all units. Without concrete evidence of immediate threat, we're scaling back operations in 15 minutes. Maintain perimeter only." "No!" Hale slammed her hand against the mobile command unit. "You can't do this." He's counting on exactly this response. The moment we pull back, he wins. "Then give us something solid," Martinez demanded. "Something we can act on." Hale took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. "Okay, look at it tactically. Dwyer needs 3 things: a view of the house, a quick escape route, and enough distance to avoid the blast if things go wrong. That narrows down where he could be." She grabbed a map of the neighborhood and spread it out. There are only 4 locations that meet all those criteria, and given his firefighter background, he'll pick the spot that gives him the best situational awareness. Inez leaned over the map. The abandoned medical office 2 blocks over. 2nd floor would give him perfect sight lines. Exactly. Hale nodded. But we can't move on it directly. The moment he suspects we're onto him, Riley's dead. The pressure of time weighed heavily on everyone. They could see Riley through the camera feed, struggling against her bonds, each minute bringing her closer to whatever endgame Dwyer had planned. "I'm not letting her die because we were too careful," Hale declared. "I'm going to start working on alternative entry points." "Cal, keep monitoring her vital signs through the camera." "Inez, I need blueprints for that medical office building." "Hale," Martinez warned. "If you're wrong about this, then I'll turn in my badge." Hale finished. "But I'm not wrong." Everything about this situation has Kellen Dwyer's signature on it. The technical expertise, the psychological manipulation, the need to prove he's smarter than everyone else. It all fits. She looked at the small beagle mix, Thimble, who had led them here. The dog hadn't stopped watching the house since they arrived, as if she knew her person was inside. That collar system wasn't just some random safety measure. Riley knew Dwyer might come for her someday. She planned for it, created a way to call for help that he wouldn't expect. Inez's computer pinged with new information. Got more on Dwyer. After losing his firefighting position, he worked briefly as a security system installer. Perfect job for learning how to rig a house, and perfect for keeping tabs on potential targets, Hale added grimly. He's had time to plan this, probably been watching Riley for months. Everything we're seeing, the tripwire, the gas setup, the strategic placement of that propane cylinder, it's all designed to make us second-guess ourselves until it's too late. Cal spoke up from his monitoring position. "Riley's trying to tell us something." She keeps making the same head movement over and over. They all crowded around the small screen. Riley was indeed moving her head in a distinct pattern, despite her restraints. It's a pattern, Hale realized. 3 quick turns, 3 slow, 3 quick again. She's confirming it's Dwyer. She knows he's out there. The radio crackled again with another warning about the impending pullback. Hale could feel the window of opportunity closing, but she refused to let Dwyer win this twisted game. "Listen," she addressed the team, her voice low and intense. "Dwyer thinks he's got us trapped by our own protocols. But he's forgetting something crucial. We're not just following a rule book here. We're fighting for someone's life. And I don't care what command says, I'm not backing down until Riley's safe." Martinez studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What do you need?" "Time," Hale replied. "And a way to approach that medical office without tipping our hand. Dwyer will be watching for any unusual movement, but he might not notice if we mix it in with the general evacuation activity." She turned to Inez. Can you create some distraction radio traffic? Make it sound like we're actually preparing to pull back." "On it," she responded, already adjusting her communications setup. "Cal, keep watching Riley. Any change in her condition, any new signals, I need to know immediately." The young EMT gave her a determined nod. She won't be alone for a second. Hale looked back at the house, knowing that somewhere in the gathering darkness, Kellen Dwyer was watching too, probably feeling satisfied that his plan was working. But Hale had spent her career reading people and situations, trusting her instincts when evidence was slim. Those same instincts were screaming at her now, telling her they were racing against a carefully calculated timeline. "Dwyer thinks he's got us all figured out," Hale muttered, more to herself than the others. "He's expecting us to follow procedure, to eventually give up and pull back when we can't find solid proof of threat. But he doesn't know about Thimble. He doesn't know Riley outsmarted him before we even arrived." The small dog pressed against her leg, as if understanding her role in undermining Dwyer's careful plans. Hale reached down to scratch her ears, drawing strength from her unwavering focus on the house where her person waited. "We're coming, Riley," she promised quietly. "And this time, Dwyer's the one who's going to be surprised." Danica Hale knelt beside Thimble, the small beagle mix who had started this whole thing. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the dog's collar over and over, searching for any additional clues they might have missed. The rain continued to drum steadily on the roof of the porch where they huddled, examining the tag under the beam of her flashlight. "There's got to be more here," she muttered, mostly to herself. Cal Monroe crouched next to her, his EMT uniform already soaked from their careful inspection of the house's exterior. The young man's face showed a mix of worry and determination as he watched her work. That's when Hale's thumb caught on something, a slight ridge beneath the main tag. "Hold this," she said, passing the flashlight to Cal. With careful fingers, she pried at the edge of what looked like a simple ID tag. To her surprise, it separated, revealing a hidden microplate underneath, no bigger than her thumbnail. "Look at this," she breathed, tilting it toward the light. Cal leaned in closer, his breath catching as they both read the tiny engraved text. "If found, say the word lantern." Hale's heart began to pound. Riley Cass had thought of everything when she'd prepared for this possibility. She'd known she might need a way to communicate even while gagged and bound. Hale's respect for her foresight grew even stronger. Moving quickly but quietly, they made their way back to the basement vent where they'd first spotted Riley through the fiber cam. Hale got down on her hands and knees, bringing her mouth close to the vent grating. "Lantern," she whispered, just loud enough to carry inside. Through the small camera feed still running on Cal's tablet, they watched Riley's reaction. The bound woman's head snapped up at the word, her eyes widening with recognition. Despite the gag, they could see relief flood her features. Then, with deliberate movements, she began jerking her head repeatedly toward the back hallway. "She's trying to tell us something," Cal whispered, his fingers gripping Hale's arm. "The back hall. There must be something there." Hale nodded, her mind racing. "We need to find another way to see that area. Can you get the fiber cam through any other vents?" They spent the next 15 minutes carefully working their way around the house's perimeter, staying low and testing each vent cover they found. Finally, they located one that opened into the back hallway Riley had indicated. The camera feed showed them what they were looking for, and Hale's blood ran cold. The breaker box mounted on the wall had been modified. Its cover hung open, revealing a mess of additional wiring that shouldn't have been there. But what really caught her attention was the cellular phone board clearly visible among the tangle of wires. "Oh, God!" Cal breathed, recognizing the implications even as Hale's years of experience confirmed their worst fears. "That's a remote detonator, isn't it?" Hale nodded grimly. "Dwyer's not just waiting to see if someone triggers his traps. He's got full control. He can set it off anytime he wants, from anywhere." The revelation hit them both hard. This wasn't just a passive trap waiting to be sprung, it was an active threat that could be triggered at any moment. Kellen Dwyer held all the power, and he was probably watching them right now, enjoying their slow realization of just how bad the situation really was. "We need to tell command," Cal said, his voice shaking slightly. "This changes everything." Hale was already reaching for her radio, but she paused, thinking it through. "Wait. If Dwyer's monitoring police frequencies, we can't risk tipping him off that we've found this. He might panic and trigger it early." Cal's face paled. "So what do we do?" "First, we need to get word to Inez at dispatch, but carefully. She can spread." The word without using official channels, Hale pulled out her phone and sent a quick text message to the dispatcher who had been helping them all night. Then she turned to Cal, her expression grave but determined. "We also need to figure out exactly how this system is wired. Dwyer's experience as a volunteer firefighter means he knows enough to be dangerous, but he might have made mistakes in the setup. If we can find a weakness..." They spent the next several minutes documenting everything they could see through the camera feed, taking screenshots and studying the wiring configuration. Hale's mind was racing, trying to put together everything they knew about Kellen Dwyer with what they were seeing. "He's showing off," Hale said finally, her voice tight with controlled anger. "This isn't just about hurting Riley anymore. He wants to prove he's smarter than all of us, especially the emergency services that he thinks wronged him." Cal nodded, his earlier nervousness giving way to focused determination. "But that need to show off might be what trips him up. Look here." He pointed to a particular junction in the wiring. "He's made it more complicated than it needs to be." Almost like he's showing his work, Hale felt a spark of hope at his observation. He was right. Dwyer's technical knowledge was real, but his ego had led him to over-engineer the setup. That might give them an opening if they could figure out how to use it. Through the camera feed, they could see Riley watching them, her eyes never leaving the vent where she knew they were. Despite her bonds, despite the immediate danger she was in, her face showed a fierce determination that matched their own. She had prepared for this possibility, had created an ingenious way to warn them and communicate even while captive. Now it was up to them to find a way to get her out safely. The rain continued to fall outside, creating a steady backdrop to their tense situation. Somewhere out there, Kellen Dwyer was watching and waiting, his finger hovering over the trigger that could end it all in an instant. But he hadn't counted on Riley's foresight, or on finding opponents who wouldn't back down despite the odds. Hale checked her phone, seeing Inez's confirmation that she understood the situation and was quietly spreading the word. They had to move carefully now, knowing that any wrong move could trigger Dwyer's response. But they also couldn't wait too long. The longer they delayed, the more likely it became that something would go wrong. "Okay," she said quietly to Cal. "Here's what we're going to do next." She began laying out a plan, knowing that every second counted, and that somewhere in this deadly puzzle, there had to be a solution that would get them all out alive. Danica Hale's mind raced as she processed the gravity of their situation. The remote detonator changed everything. Kellen Dwyer wasn't just waiting to spring a trap. He was actively listening and ready to strike at any moment. With trembling fingers that betrayed her usual steadiness, Hale reached for her radio and switched it off with a decisive click. "Everyone, kill the radio chatter. Now." Her voice was low, but commanding as she gestured to the other officers. "Dwyer's probably monitoring our frequencies." Cal Monroe's eyes widened with understanding as he quickly disabled his own radio. Around them, other first responders followed suit, the usual background static falling into eerie silence. Hale pulled out her phone instead, fingers flying across the screen as she typed out a message to dispatcher Inez Cabrera. Switching to encrypted texts. Dwyer's listening to radios. Need silent approach. The response came almost immediately. Copy that. What's the play? Hale's gaze swept over the house's exterior, noting every possible entry point. The front door was absolutely out of the question. That tripwire wasn't Dwyer's only surprise, she was sure of it. Her eyes settled on the neighboring house, and a plan began forming in her mind. She texted Inez. Need blueprint overlay of 114 Wyeth plus next door. Looking for shared walls. While waiting for the response, she pulled Cal aside, speaking in hushed tones. There might be a crawl space between these houses. Old builds in this neighborhood often have them. If we're lucky, it'll give us access through the pantry wall. Cal nodded, his face pale but determined. Better than walking into his trap through the front. Inez's text arrived with attached blueprints. Hale's heart leapt. There it was, exactly what she'd hoped for. A narrow maintenance crawl space ran between the houses, connecting to 114 Wyeth's kitchen area. It would be tight, dirty, and dangerous, but it was their best shot at reaching Riley without triggering Dwyer's setup. Monroe, Hale whispered, showing him the blueprint. You're smaller than me. Think you can handle a crawl? Cal swallowed hard but squared his shoulders. Yes, ma'am. Just tell me what to do. They moved carefully to the neighboring house, where the homeowner quickly granted them access after Hale explained the situation. In the basement, they located the access panel to the crawl space, a dark, cobweb-filled gap, barely wide enough for a person to shimmy through. Stay low and quiet, Hale instructed, helping Cal check his gear. The vibrations from movement could alert Dwyer if he's got sensors placed. Go slow no matter what you hear. Cal nodded, his face set with determination despite the fear evident in his eyes. What about Riley? She must be terrified down there. Hale's jaw clenched as she thought of the young woman bound in the basement, the propane cylinder beside her a constant threat. She's stronger than we know. She planned for this with that collar system. She knew someone would come. They cleared away the cobwebs and dust from the crawlspace entrance. The beam of Hale's flashlight revealed old pipes, exposed beams, and what looked like decades of accumulated grime. She texted Inez again, starting crawlspace entry. Keep units back. No visible movement outside. Don't want to spook Dwyer. Cal lay on his stomach, preparing to enter the narrow space. Hale handed him a small radio earpiece. Different frequency than the main channels, less likely to be monitored. 3 clicks if you need immediate extraction, 2 for progress updates, 1 for all clear. He took a deep breath, nodded, and began inching forward into the darkness. Hale watched as he disappeared into the cramped space, her heart pounding with each small sound of movement. The stakes couldn't be higher. 1 wrong move, 1 creak too loud, and Dwyer could trigger the detonator. Through the earpiece, Hale could hear Cal's controlled breathing as he worked his way forward inch by inch. Every few minutes, 2 soft clicks would come through, letting her know he was still moving. The progress was agonizingly slow, but rush now could mean disaster. Meanwhile, in the basement of 114 Wyeth, Riley Cass sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the propane cylinder beside her. She'd known Kellen would eventually try something like this. It's why she'd created the warning system with Thimble in the first place. But knowing it might happen hadn't made the reality any less terrifying. A faint scratching sound caught her attention, something in the walls. Her heart rate spiked until she realized the sound was too deliberate, too careful to be random. Someone was coming for her, but not through the obvious routes Kellen would be watching. A surge of hope rose in her chest, but she forced herself to remain still, not wanting to give anything away if Kellen was monitoring. Back in the neighboring basement, Hale kept her eyes glued to her phone, waiting for updates from both Inez and Cal. The minutes crawled by like hours. 2 clicks in her earpiece. Cal was still moving. A text from Inez. No movement detected outside. Streets still clear. The waiting was the hardest part. Every fiber of Hale's being wanted to charge in, to take action, to do something. But she knew that patience was their only advantage right now. Dwyer would be expecting a frontal assault, counting on their urgency to make mistakes. The crawlspace was slow, dangerous, and uncomfortable, exactly why it might work. Another set of clicks from Cal, followed by his whispered voice, barely audible, almost at the wall to 114. Need tools for access. Hale texted back specific instructions about the best way to create an opening without making noise or vibrations that might trigger any sensors. Her experience as a K9 handler had taught her about careful entries, about reading situations and finding unexpected solutions. Now, sidelined from that duty by her injury, those same skills might save Riley's life. Through the earpiece, she could hear Cal's careful movements as he began working on the wall. The sound of each gentle scrape seemed to echo in her ears, though she knew it was barely audible in reality. One wrong move, one slip of the hand, and everything could go wrong. The next few minutes stretched out like an eternity as Cal worked on creating their access point. Hale divided her attention between her phone, monitoring communications with Inez, and the earpiece, listening for any sign of trouble. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her. Riley's life, Cal's safety, and the chance to finally stop Dwyer all hung in the balance. This was the moment that would prove whether her instincts were still sharp, whether she could still protect and serve effectively even without her K9 partner. The doubt that had plagued her since her injury tried to surface, but she pushed it aside. There would be time for self-reflection later. Right now, Riley needed her focused and clear-headed. 2 more clicks came through the earpiece, followed by Cal's whispered update. Making progress. Walls old, coming apart clean. Should have access soon. Hale texted Inez. Stand by for phase 2. Moment we have entry, need immediate power cut to whole block. Dwyer's detonator might have backup power, but every second of confusion helps. In the basement, Riley heard the scratching sounds growing closer. She forced herself to keep breathing steadily, to show no reaction that might tip off any cameras Kellen might have hidden. The sound of hope was getting nearer, but she knew better than anyone how dangerous hope could be when Kellen Dwyer was involved. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. With each careful movement through the cramped crawl space, Danica Hale felt her knee screaming in protest. The musty smell of damp earth filled her nostrils as she army-crawled forward, inch by painful inch. Behind her, Cal Monroe followed closely, his breathing steady but nervous in the tight space. You doing okay back there? Hale whispered over her shoulder, keeping her voice barely above a breath. I'm good, Cal replied softly. Just keep going. Their flashlights cast weak beams through the dusty darkness, illuminating cobwebs and ancient wooden support beams. The narrow tunnel seemed to stretch endlessly, though Hale knew they'd only been crawling for about 10 minutes. They finally reached the connecting wall to 114 Wyeth's pantry. Hale pulled out the specialized cutting tools they'd brought, quiet ones that wouldn't alert anyone monitoring the house. Her hands were steady despite the pressure of knowing Riley's life depended on their success. Hand me the fiberscope, she whispered to Cal. He passed forward the thin camera, and Hale carefully threaded it through a tiny hole she'd drilled. The pantry appeared empty on the small screen. Good. They could work without immediate detection. Starting the cut now, she breathed. Keep watch behind us. The specialized saw made little noise as it worked through the drywall and wooden supports. Sweat beaded on Hale's forehead as she concentrated on making the opening large enough for them to slip through while keeping the debris contained. They couldn't risk any noise that might tip off Dwyer if he was monitoring the house. After what felt like hours but was likely only 30 minutes, Hale had created an opening just big enough for them to squeeze through. She carefully removed the cut section and set it aside. Monroe first, she whispered. You're smaller. You'll have an easier time getting through quietly. Cal nodded and began wiggling his way through the tight opening. Hale watched anxiously as he disappeared into the pantry, holding her breath until he gave her a thumbs up from the other side. She followed, grinding her teeth against the pain in her knee as she maneuvered through. Inside the pantry, they could hear Riley's muffled breathing from the basement below. Hale pulled out her multi-tool and gestured for Cal to follow her. They crept toward the basement stairs, testing each step before putting their full weight down to avoid any creaks. The basement air was thick with the smell of propane. Riley's eyes widened when she saw them, but she remained perfectly still, understanding the need for absolute silence. Hale's heart clenched at the sight of her bound to the support pole, duct tape across her mouth. While Cal moved to free Riley, Hale focused on the complex web of wires and tubes running from the propane tank. Her K-9 unit training had included recognizing explosive devices, and this setup was professionally done. Dwyer clearly knew what he was doing. Working methodically, Hale traced each connection. The timer was crude but effective, a modified digital clock wired to spark plugs that would ignite the gas. She carefully disconnected the power source first, then began dismantling the trigger mechanism. Behind her, she could hear Cal whispering gentle reassurances to Riley as he cut through the rope bindings. "You're doing great. We're going to get you out of here. Just stay quiet for a little longer." The propane line itself was the biggest concern. Hale found where it connected to the house's gas system and slowly closed the valve, then began disconnecting the flexible hose. Her hands remained steady even as her heart pounded. One wrong move could still trigger disaster. "Cal," she whispered, "in my pack there's a length of venting hose. Grab it for me?" He finished freeing Riley's hands and retrieved the hose. Hale connected it to the propane tank's output valve and fed the other end through a small window well, allowing any remaining gas to vent safely outside rather than building up in the basement. Riley rubbed her wrists where the ropes had cut into them as Cal gently removed the duct tape from her mouth. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks, but her eyes showed more relief than fear now. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Hale nodded as she finished securing the last of the disabled wiring. She did one final check of all the connections, making absolutely certain nothing was left active that could trigger an explosion. The timer was dead, the gas was venting outside, and the detonator was disconnected. For the first time since this nightmare began, Hale felt her shoulders relax slightly. They'd done it. They'd gotten to Riley and dismantled the trap without alerting Dwyer. The immediate danger was neutralized. Cal helped Riley to her feet, supporting her as her legs wobbled from being bound for so long. The young EMT's training kicked in as he did a quick medical assessment, checking Riley's vitals and looking for any injuries that needed immediate attention. "Blood pressure's a little low but steady," Cal whispered. "Some rope burns and bruising, but nothing critical. She's okay to move." Hale nodded, relief washing over her as she realized they'd succeeded in the most dangerous part of their mission. Riley was safe, the trap was disabled, and they'd managed to do it all without triggering any of Dwyer's fail-safes. The crawlspace passage they'd created would be tight, but it was their safest way out. They couldn't risk trying to exit through any of the house's regular doors or windows. There was no telling what other surprises Dwyer might have rigged. "We'll go back the way we came in," Hale explained in barely a whisper. "Cal, you lead Riley through. I'll follow last to make sure we haven't missed anything." Riley nodded in understanding, her expression showing both exhaustion and determination. Cal guided her toward the pantry, explaining in hushed tones exactly how to navigate the tight crawl space ahead of them. Hale did one final sweep of the basement, her flashlight beam catching the haunting message still scrawled on the wall. "Don't call." The words sent a chill down her spine, despite their apparent victory. Something about this felt too easy, but she pushed the thought aside. Right now, what mattered was getting Riley to safety. She followed the others up the basement stairs, wincing at every tiny creak of the old wood. In the pantry, Cal was already helping Riley through their makeshift entrance to the crawl space. The opening was tight, but Riley managed to squeeze through without making a sound. Before following, Hale took one last look around the pantry. Everything was as they'd found it, except for the disabled trap in the basement. No sign of their presence except the cut wall, which would only be noticed by someone specifically looking in this rarely used space. The relief she felt was tempered by years of experience that told her to stay alert until everyone was completely clear of danger. But for now, at least, they'd achieved what seemed impossible just hours ago. They'd rescued Riley and neutralized the deadly trap without alerting her twisted ex-boyfriend. As Hale prepared to follow the others through the wall, she allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. Her instincts had been right. trusting that Puppy's warning had led them here, and now an innocent life had been saved because she'd refused to ignore her gut feelings. The sudden crash shattered the night's silence like a thunderclap, violent and jarring. Metal screamed against metal as Dwyer's pickup truck slammed headlong into the parked squad car, the sickening crunch echoing down the quiet street. The cruiser skidded sideways across the wet pavement with a screech of tires, sparks flaring as it ground against the curb. The impact was so violent it made the windows of nearby houses rattle in their frames, curtains swaying, as if the entire neighborhood had flinched awake. Inside the kitchen of 114 Wyeth Street, Danica Hale's head snapped toward the sound, heart seizing in her chest. A rush of dread followed as she heard car doors wrenched open, hinges groaning under the force, followed by the thunder of heavy boots pounding hard across concrete. They'd been so focused on their delicate rescue inside the house that they had missed Dwyer's approach until it was already upon them. "Get down!" Hale shouted, voice edged with panic, but her warning came a fraction too late. The kitchen window exploded inward as Dwyer fired his pistol through it, the gunshot deafening in the confined space. Shards of glass showered across the floor like deadly rain, glittering in the dim light as they scattered. The bullet struck its target with terrifying accuracy, the propane cylinder they had just disconnected. The metal tank punctured with a sharp, high-pitched hiss, immediately filling the air with an invisible but suffocating cloud of flammable gas. Hale's training kicked in instantly, muscle memory overriding shock. Her hands flew to her radio, ripping the battery pack free with practiced speed and tossing it aside. Even the smallest electrical spark could ignite the propane now flooding the room. "Batteries!" she yelled to Cal, her voice rough. "Anything that could spark, get rid of it!" Cal didn't hesitate. He grabbed Riley with both arms and pulled her to the floor, forcing her low to the ground, the safest place in the rising haze. Both of them crawled quickly away from the spreading gas cloud. His own radio clattered across the tile as he yanked its power source loose and tossed it into the corner. The door banged open with a violent crash as Dwyer burst into the kitchen, his face twisted with a mixture of rage and triumph. The pistol in his hand swung between targets, his predatory gaze settling on Riley like a hawk, singling out prey. "You really thought you could outsmart me?" He snarled, spittle at the corner of his mouth. "I know every trick in the emergency response playbook." The propane continued to hiss from the damaged tank, a steady serpent's whisper that filled the silence between words, creating a deadly atmosphere that grew more volatile with each passing second. One spark, from a light switch, a cell phone, even static from a wool sleeve, could turn the entire house into a roaring fireball. But Hale couldn't let herself focus on that right now. Dwyer was the immediate, pressing threat, and the man's background as a firefighter only made him more dangerous. He knew exactly what he was doing by releasing the gas, had deliberately engineered a situation where any attempt to stop him could kill everyone in the house. "It's over, Kellen," Hale said, forcing her voice steady despite the adrenaline hammering through her body and the raw fear clawing at the edges of her thoughts. "The house is surrounded. You've got nowhere to go." Dwyer's laugh was cold and hollow, without a trace of humor. "You think I care about getting away?" This was never about escape. This was about making sure Riley understood the consequences of crossing me. "If I go down, she's coming with me." The propane was getting thicker by the moment. Hale could smell its distinctive, acrid tang filling her nose and throat, making her head swim slightly and her chest ache. Her instinct screamed that they needed to end this fast, but every nerve in her body knew that any sudden movement could create the spark they all feared. That's when Thimble made its move. The small beagle mix had been forgotten in the chaos, overlooked amid the shouting and danger. But the dog had not forgotten its mission to protect Riley. With a growl that seemed impossibly fierce for such a small frame, Thimble launched itself at Dwyer's ankles, sharp teeth sinking deep into flesh. Dwyer howled in pain and surprise, his attention torn away for a crucial second. It was all the opening Hale needed. She hurled herself across the kitchen, tackling Dwyer with every ounce of strength she possessed. They crashed to the floor together with bone-jarring force, the pistol skittering away across the tiles in a metallic clatter. The fight that followed was brutal and desperate. Both knew that any wrong move could trigger a catastrophic explosion, but neither could afford to hold back. Dwyer fought with the savage intensity of someone with nothing left to lose, every strike carrying the weight of fury and despair. Hale struggled to subdue him without creating any sparks from their shoes or clothing scraping against the slick floor. Thimble maintained its grip on Dwyer's leg, a furious anchor that limited his movement as Hale grappled with him. The dog's loyalty was staggering. Even with the air becoming more toxic and dangerous by the second, it refused to release its hold, its growls vibrating through the chaos. They rolled across the floor, trading savage blows and wrestling for control. Dwyer's elbow smashed into Hale's ribs, driving the air from her lungs in a painful rush. Hale responded with a sharp knee to Dwyer's side, trying to shift the balance and force him into a position where she could finally restrain him. The propane hissed on, steady and merciless, filling the kitchen with its invisible threat. Cal had managed to drag Riley to the far corner of the room, both of them crouched low where the gas was thinnest. But escape was impossible. Any attempt to fling open a door or window might create the spark that doomed them all. Hale could feel sweat soaking through her uniform, stinging her eyes as she fought to control Dwyer. The ex-firefighter was strong, skilled, and ruthless, using every dirty trick he knew. They were locked in a battle fought inches from death, every movement carrying the risk of ignition. Dwyer's hand scraped across the floor, fingers stretching desperately for his dropped pistol. Hale seized his wrist, twisting it back hard until Dwyer grunted in pain. But the desperate man wouldn't yield. He drove his head forward suddenly, catching Hale in the chin with a vicious headbutt. Stars burst in Hale's vision, the impact rattling her teeth, but she refused to let go. She couldn't allow Dwyer to break free, not with Riley's life hanging in the balance, not with everyone in the house balanced on the edge of disaster. The taste of coppery blood filled her mouth where she'd bitten her tongue, but she shoved the sensation aside, focusing entirely on the life-or-death struggle. Thimble, still latched stubbornly onto Dwyer's leg, shifted its grip higher, tearing at muscle and tendon. Dwyer cried out in agony again, the sound raw and guttural. The distraction gave Hale the precious leverage she needed. With a surge of strength, she flipped Dwyer onto his stomach, driving a knee into the small of his back while maintaining an iron grip on his arms. The propane cloud grew thicker with each passing second, every breath scorching Hale's lungs. But she couldn't stop now. She had to keep Dwyer pinned, had to prevent him from reaching for any weapon or making any move that could ignite the gas. They were all trapped together in this deadly standoff, where survival and destruction balanced on the sharpest edge imaginable. Stars exploded across Danica Hale's vision, but she held on grimly. Years of canine training had taught her never to let go once you had a grip on a suspect. Her knee throbbed from the awkward position on the floor, the pain sharp and insistent, but she pushed through it, using her weight and sheer willpower to keep Dwyer pinned beneath her. "Thimble, watch him!" Hale commanded instinctively, her voice hoarse but commanding. The little beagle mix responded as if they'd worked together for years, circling with sharp, purposeful movements. The dog barked once, low and warning, blocking Dwyer's attempts to reach for anything in his pockets, its small body taut with focus. With practiced movements, Hale managed to wrangle one of Dwyer's arms behind his back, then the other, forcing each limb down despite his thrashing. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the gas-filled kitchen, harsh and final, as she secured them tightly around Dwyer's wrists. The sound cut through the hiss of escaping propane like punctuation to the chaos. "You have the right to remain silent," Hale recited, her voice rough from the fumes searing her throat and lungs. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Cal, still crouched low to avoid the thickening gas, was already dragging the leaking propane hose through the back door. Fresh air rushed in, cold against sweat-slick skin, as he pulled the line completely outside. The dangerous hiss softened, dissipating as the breeze carried the fumes away. His EMT training showed in his efficient movements, every action deliberate, even under pressure. Within moments he was back, kneeling beside Riley, checking her breathing and pulse with a calm professionalism that steadied the room. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, scanning her face for signs of trauma. Riley nodded, her eyes wide, still fixed on Dwyer's restrained form. Her voice, when it came, was a faint whisper. "I am now." The wail of approaching sirens swelled, growing louder by the second as backup units converged on the block. Through the shattered kitchen windows, Hale caught sight of flashing red and blue lights dancing across the wet pavement. The distinctive black vehicles of the bomb squad rolled up behind them, their trained technicians already suiting up, faces set with focus as they prepared to sweep the building. "Clear the house," Hale ordered, her voice firm despite exhaustion. She hauled Dwyer to his feet with a grunt, muscles burning from the prolonged fight. "Everyone out now." They stepped into the cool night air just as the bomb squad approached in formation. Their leader, Lieutenant Santos, scanned the scene with quick, experienced eyes, taking in the restrained suspect, the venting gas, and the shaken but living Riley. "Officer Hale," she acknowledged with a curt nod. "We'll take it from here. House needs to be thoroughly cleared before anyone goes back in." Hale handed Dwyer off to two waiting patrol officers who secured him in the back of a cruiser. The former firefighter's face twisted into a mask of impotent rage, his jaw clenched, eyes burning with frustration as he watched his carefully orchestrated vengeance collapse around him. Detective Marcus arrived moments later, his notebook already open, pen flying across the page. "Kellen Dwyer," he said flatly, studying the man through the cruiser's reinforced window. "Attempted murder, attempted arson, kidnapping, booby-trapping with intent to harm first responders." He kept writing, the list of charges growing almost as fast as his disbelief. "You'll be away for a very long time." Riley approached Hale, who was seated on the bumper of an ambulance while a paramedic checked her for gas exposure, flashlight shining briefly into her eyes. Thimble trotted faithfully at Riley's heels, tail wagging with cautious energy. "Thank you," Riley said softly. Her voice trembled, but there was conviction beneath it. "Not just for the rescue, though I'm grateful for that too, but for believing the warning, for trusting that a message on a dog's collar could mean something real." Hale met her gaze, understanding in her eyes. "Sometimes the smallest signs matter most," she said quietly. "We just have to pay attention." "I knew most people would ignore it," Riley admitted, voice cracking as adrenaline ebbed from her system. "Would think it was a prank or a false alarm. But I had to try something. Kellen, he was always so careful, never left evidence, never gave me a way to prove what he was doing. Training Thimble was my last resort." The little dog's tail thumped at the sound of his name. Hale reached down to scratch behind his ears, earning a soft, grateful whine. The connection between them was undeniable, born of the night's chaos and courage. "About Thimble," Riley continued, her tone hesitant but hopeful. "I need to relocate somewhere safe, somewhere Kellen won't be able to find me when he eventually gets out. It might take a few weeks to arrange everything." She glanced from Hale to the beagle, watching the way the dog pressed against her. Would you be willing to look after him until then? He clearly trusts you, and I'd feel better knowing he's with someone who understands." Hale looked down at the small, brave creature who had started it all. Thimble gazed back with soulful eyes, the same ones that had stopped her cruiser in the rain and altered the course of the night. "I'd be honored," she replied, her throat tight with emotion. As if understanding, Thimble hopped up onto the ambulance bumper beside Hale, pressing against her side, solid and warm. His presence grounded her, and for the first time in months she felt whole again. For too long, Hale had felt adrift, sidelined from the K-9 unit she loved, relegated to routine patrol duty that seemed endless and meaningless. But tonight had proved her instincts remained razor-sharp, her training invaluable. She had recognized the signs others dismissed, trusted her gut when protocol demanded she wait, and in doing so had saved lives. The chief approached, his expression a blend of approval, fatigue, and lingering concern. "Good work tonight, Hale. Though we'll need to discuss proper procedures for future situations." "Yes, sir," Hale replied, no hesitation in her tone. There was no shame. She knew she'd made the right call. "That said," the chief added, voice softer, "your actions saved lives tonight. Not just Miss Cass, but potentially the whole block if that gas had ignited. Sometimes following your instincts is the best procedure there is." Hale nodded gratefully, her arm draped protectively around Thimble. The little dog's heartbeat pulsed steady against her ribs, reminding her exactly who she was, not just a sidelined officer, but a guardian, a protector who could see the signals others ignored and act when no one else dared. The bomb squad emerged from the house minutes later, their leader signaling the all-clear. Forensics teams began their meticulous documentation, cameras flashing, evidence bags filling. Justice would be served properly, thoroughly, by the book. Riley watched with visible relief, the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. "I should go give my statement," she said softly. She paused, her eyes lingering on Thimble. "Take care of him for me." "We'll take care of each other," Hale promised with quiet conviction. As Riley walked away, Hale looked down at her new partner. Thimble's tail thumped rhythmically against the ambulance bumper, his dark eyes filled with both loyalty and expectation. "What do you say, buddy?" Hale asked, her voice low and warm. "Ready to help me protect and serve?" Thimble's answering bark rang through the night, bright and sure, carrying far beyond the quiet street. In that moment, Hale felt her purpose return with absolute clarity. She wasn't just a sidelined officer anymore, she was a protector reborn, stronger than before, with a brave little partner by her side. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.